Now, I'm Josh. This video was sponsored by headphones.com. You can pre-order these headphones, either one of them that we talked about down below. And while they are sponsoring, I'm not being paid or asked to say anything good or bad, and all thoughts and opinions, like always, are going to be my own. This headphone equals aesthetics. It's just beautiful. I've said this before with some previous focals, but I really do think that this one is the best looking one they've made so far. Now, the feeling on your head of this is exactly the same as that of the Azurus. It's a little bit smaller of an overall profile than previous focal headphones like the Elex and the Clear, but it's actually more comfortable. And this one is super light at like 290 grams, which for reference, a HT600 is only 260. So this is a very light, comfortable headphone. The space inside the cups might be a little bit small for some users, but I really think that they're doing great things with the build here. If this is the new direction that they're going, I think their higher end model should move to a more premium metal feeling. But in terms of the pressure and the shape and the comfort points, I think they're nailing it right now. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I've been really impressed with what Focal has been able to do recently, releasing both an open back and a closed back headphone that both happen to be pretty good for the price ranges. That's hard to do, actually. Not a lot of companies can really pull that off, especially on the closed back end. Lots of companies miss and miss and miss with very few hits. But the Azurus, which I just reviewed, in my opinion, is one of the best closed backs that exists. Definitely one of the best focals. And coming out of this review, I was curious if the Hadenys would carry on that level of kind of awesomeness moving forward. One thing I do want to call Focal out for is I'm really not seeing what the premium price is over the Azurus. So the Azurus comes in at $550 if you want to pre-order it. This comes in at $699, so $150 more. And the build doesn't really indicate to me where that money, the extra $150 is really coming from, honestly. These should probably both be priced the same, yeah, they're charging a bit of a premium for this. Now, due to that premium, it almost puts this headphone in a slightly higher price category for headphones and makes the comparisons much more difficult and its competition much more fierce. And because of that, I want to talk a bit about some comparative headphones in this review. This video was made possible by headphones.com. If you do want to check out any of the headphones that we talk about today, I would recommend checking them out at headphones.com. The store has great customer service and reward points. I would check them out down in the description. Thanks a lot, Headphones. And I feel like the Treble is a great place to start because if you're looking at comparable headphones, Treble is going to be a deciding factor for what you want to listen to and how you want to listen. Do you want a more smooth approach to the Treble response where not everything is screaming out at you, not everything is super tactile, and it's kind of smoother, more enjoyable, warmer? Or do you want a Treble response that really reaches out and grabs you and gives you every last bit of detail that it can possibly manage to give you? And then there's somewhere in between. And this kind of lands in that somewhere in between with a slightly warmer take. It's not extremely detailed for this price, actually. In fact, headphones like the DT1990 Pro, headphones like even the 109 Pro, have a more active and more forward treble response to my ear. This also comes along with a bit more detail, of course, and more kind of room information. You get better sound staging with those than you do with this, which is one of the only sonic downsides that I'm really hearing with this headphone, is that the sound staging is not the widest for the price range. Now, because the sound mirrors a lot of the Azurus, one of the things that does carry over here is the imaging of this is phenomenal. It doesn't sound stage super wide, but you do get this very clear sense of kind of the shape of the sound, the placement for instruments. And it's actually one of the better imaging headphones at this price range. So in this comparisons, sound staging, not as wide, but imaging, one of the best. Now, comparing the treble response to other Focal headphones, if I'm comparing against the Elex versus the Clear, for example, I like this more than the Elex, but I like the Clear a little bit more. The Clear sounds a bit more clear, and it also sounds more like crystalline and precise and clean up there than this does. This seems a little bit less forward than the Clear, but it's got, in my opinion, kind of better control than that of the Elex, which is a little bit loose. Now, mid-range is another area where I actually really prefer this over the Elex. I think that this is a much better performing mid-range headphone than the Elex is. And versus the Clear, I think it's much more competitive, and I think it's a little bit different, but both are really good in their own way. One of the things that's really good about the Hadenys is a sense of tactility and texture to the voice. So all these slight modulations in my voice really pop through, especially on like a deeper, kind of a more textured microphone like an SM7B. That kind of texture pops through in a very, very tangible way, in a way that most focals actually don't do. Most focals actually skip that kind of lower end kind of oscillating pressure and hit you with more top-end information for the voice specifically. But the vocal presentation here is one of my favorite from Focal, and it's one of my favorite at this price range, actually. I actually prefer this over the DT1990 Pro, which has more of a zingy S&T focused top end, and the 109 Pro, which has a little bit more of a dip in the lower mids compared to this. And it kind of skips a lot of the texture and kind of gusto that a voice can really have. And texture really isn't the only thing that I find very impressive about the vocalist, actually. This actually ties into its timbre, oddly enough. Sometimes a headphone like this one can have a very good timbre in one area and a less than stellar timbre in another area. And the way this kind of sounds to me is a little bit off timbre in a good way, like a warm way for the bass. And then it goes in the mids, which happen to clean up and sound very neutral to me. Not overly detailed, but the neutrality and kind of evenness of a voice really pops through. And then it kind of goes back into a slightly kind of off timbre, warmer sound for the treble response. So it kind of oscillates. So it will do off timbre bass, on timbre mid-range, and then off timbre treble. But it's actually kind of nice because it ends up being V-shaped from neutrality and not necessarily tuning, because the mid-range and the bass kind of pop through the most on this headphone, but the timbre of it actually allows the bass and the treble to sound separate from the vocalist, while the vocalist still sounds forward and really, really good. It's very strange, very pleasing. Now the bass. This is very hard hitting for an open back headphone, actually. It doesn't quite go as low or hit quite as hard as the Azurus, which kind of overperforms for bass in my opinion, but that's kind of the nature of open backs. They've never been as strong as closed back headphones. So you'll kind of see a slight roll off into the really low frequencies, like 20 to 40 hertz. But even still down in those regions, you get an amazing amount of punch. And it's more akin to what I would expect from the Focal Clear and less like the Elex. It's stronger by quite a large margin than the Elex in terms of boosted kind of a bass punchiness, and the texture to go along with it is really nice. And as discussed, the timbre is very, very pleasing. I think the DT1990 Pro has a different frequency delivery. It's a little bit more kind of rounded than the more linear line that this is. But I think the 1990 is a bit more bass neutral, whereas this is a little bit warmer focused, but it's still got kind of an audiophile appeal. It's still very textured and very pleasing, but it hits you with quite a bit of punch. So in my just personal opinion, I think for bass, this is actually one of the better performing open back headphones at this price range. It's very impressive to me. It may not have the same bass depth as some planar magnetic headphones, but the punch and texture is just really tangible and very nice. Now, the difficult part about this headphone becomes the price range. You have all of the Sennheisers that exist below this price. You have the 1990 Pro and the 109 Pro and some Odyssey headphones that are around about this price. And you have to compete with existing Focal headphones like the Focal Elex and the OG Clear. Now, when it comes to the Elex, honestly, this is a replacement in my book. This does basically everything better than the Elex does. It's more comfortable. The build looks better. It's easier to drive. I guess the case isn't as cool, but it comes with a carry case, which is better than the box that the Elex comes with. The bass is better, the mid-range is better, and the treble sounds a little bit smoother. The only thing that the Elex has over this is sound staging. The Clear is a bit more difficult. It's also more expensive though. It's less comfortable. I think the bass and the sound staging are wins, and then I think the mid-range and the treble response comes to a decision over personal preference. I don't think one is vastly superior over the other. When it comes to buying advice, there are a few headphones that really stand out here that I would consider real contenders. 109 Pro is a big one. I think that's a bit more V-shaped, and this is a bit more mid-range and bass focused. So that kind of goes up to preference. And then if you're kind of looking into this general sound, but might have some different kind of life needs, the Azurus is a legitimate contender to this. Like in some cases, for some songs, I prefer the sound quality of the Azurus over the Hadenys. And I think one area where they really could have made the Hadenys stand out massively, especially from the Azurus, is the sound staging. That would have been well worth the $150 premium. And it is wider, but it's not substantially wider than its closed back counterpart. So I like both headphones a lot. I love the aesthetics. I love the general sound quality of both of them. I think that there's some really wonderful headphones. The only reason why I have any hesitancy in recommending them over other stuff is just because the other existing headphones on the market are also so good. So like most things, there's not a one size fits all. I think you should pick the headphone that kind of fits your circumstances, fits your sound preferences. And I think that these are excellent considerations for this price range. They're some of the top contenders. I don't have any major faults with either of them. All right, guys, thanks a lot for watching. I want to thank headphones.com for sponsoring today's video. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.